Imagine you're standing right at the edge of a roaring racetrack, stopwatch in hand, tracking race car driver Terry Vogel. As he whips past you lap after lap, you're logging his times. Are these times just completely random, dictated by the absolute chaos of the race? Or is there a hidden structure? Can we actually mathematically predict his performance?
By the end of this explainer, you're going to know exactly how to answer that question. You'll understand how to take raw, messy, empirical lap times, visualize them step by step, and then compare them to a pristine theoretical normal distribution. We're literally going to map the chaos of real life onto a perfect mathematical model.
Step 1. Collecting the data. Now that we've got the basic idea down, let's start with how we actually gather and organize our raw data like a true statistician. To do this right, we follow a strict process. We start with a stratified sampling method for laps 2 through 7. This ensures we get a fair representation from all phases of the race, kind of like taking a bite from every layer of a cake rather than just the frosting on top. From there, we construct a histogram, calculate our mean and standard deviation to measure the spread, and finally draw a smooth curve over the whole thing. Now, when we graph it, empirical data rarely looks perfect. Plotted into distinct intervals on our histogram, each bar shows exactly how many times Terry hit a specific lap time bracket. It's blocky, it's a bit uneven, but it is 100% real life. Now, you might be staring at this blocky chart and asking a very fair question. Wait, why do we bother drawing a smooth curve over these rigid bars? What's the actual point of tracing a pencil line over this data? Well, that smooth curve acts as a visual filter. It helps us instantly spot the general shape of the data, totally independent of the blocky intervals. It's like squinting your eyes to see the forest instead of the individual trees. We want to see if a recognizable pattern is hiding in all that noise. Is it straight? Is it V-shaped? Or crucially, does it have a distinct hump in the middle? That visual check is our very first clue. Step 2, analyzing the distribution. Once we've visualized our data and spotted that potential hump, we move from just looking at the shape to mathematically analyzing the distribution. Using our sample mean and sample standard deviation, we can define the approximate theoretical normal distribution of Vogel's lap times. In statistics, we write this as x follows n with the mean and standard deviation in parentheses. A common mistake students make is confusing the messy sample with the actual model. But think of this formula as a mathematical blueprint. It's a hypothesis that basically says, hey, if Terry drove perfectly consistently according to his averages, his lap times would look exactly like this. Which brings us to empirical versus theoretical. This is the absolute core of our lab today, the ultimate showdown. We're comparing the messy actual data against the perfect, smooth approximation of theory. To figure out if our blueprint is actually useful, we calculate the exact same data points for both our actual empirical sample and our theoretical normal approximation. If the numbers match up closely, boom, we know our mathematical model is a fantastic tool for predicting Terry's future races. If they don't, well, then reality is clearly a lot more complicated. Before we calculate our spread, let's pause for a quick knowledge check. We need to compare how spread out the middle chunk of our lap times is. So what is the formula for the interquartile range, or IQR? You got it. The interquartile range is simply the third quartile minus the first quartile, or Q3 minus Q1. This isolates the middle 50% of all our data, trimming off the exceptionally fast outlier laps and the really slow, mistake-filled ones. We need to find this IQR for both our empirical set and our theoretical set. Next, we dive a little deeper. We systematically map out specific milestones, the 15th percentile, the median, and the 85th percentile. We figure out these three exact numbers for the collected empirical data, and then we calculate them again using the theoretical distribution. Putting them side by side like this lets us instantly spot the differences. Wait, this is important. It's so easy to just view a percentile as a boring number on a spreadsheet. But what does that 85th percentile actually mean in the real world of car racing? Think about it. In racing, a lower time means a faster lap. So if the 85th percentile is, say, 130 seconds, that means 85% of all recorded lap times fall at or below this specific time value. Terry completed 85% of his laps in 130 seconds or less, leaving only 15% of laps slower than that mark. Translating the math back into reality is absolutely crucial for understanding what the model is telling us. Now let's connect this to a highly practical example using that exact 130 seconds. Let's say the pit crew wants to know the odds of Terry having a bad lap.
we want to calculate the probability that a randomly chosen lap time is more than 130 seconds.
To really test our model, we do this twice. First, out of all the actual empirical laps we recorded, what percentage were over 130 seconds? Then, we ask our mathematical model, what is the theoretical probability of a lap over 130 seconds? By comparing the empirical probability directly against the theoretical probability, we can see exactly how well our model predicts reality. Discussion. Do they match? We've run the numbers, we've filled out our tables, and we've calculated the probabilities. To make our final call, we look at everything we've built. We compare the empirical values to the theoretical values. We look at the differences in our IQR, the median, and the percentiles. If those numbers are super close, we can definitively decide that the data fits a continuous normal distribution. If they're far apart, then the normal distribution just isn't a good fit. And this brilliantly illustrates why we do all of this in the first place. The goal of statistics isn't just to make fancy charts. The goal is mapping the messy, unpredictable real-world race onto a perfect mathematical track. Because once we prove that our theoretical model actually reflects reality, we can use it to predict the future. But this leaves us with one final provocative question. Today, we only sampled a small handful of laps. What happens to our distribution shape when our sample sizes grow even larger? Say we analyze thousands of labs instead of just a few. That question unlocks our next major statistical concept, a massive game changer known as the central limit theorem. It reveals an amazing hidden order in the universe of data, and you're definitely going to want to explore it in our next explainer. Thanks for joining me, and keep